and I am thrilled that so many of you made the time to join us today. I know I personally was hesitant about having this, and then I thought if there's anybody's words that soothe and pacify, it is William Stafford's. His pacifism we need so badly at this time as well. So, Karen, please take it away. If the rest of you would mute yourselves.
So much. And Rhonda, thank you so much for organizing us. There's little harder than hurting poets, and maybe it's even more difficult when we're at a distance. And thank you, Kansas Authors Club and the Watkins Museum. I'm going to be reading some things from my new book, How Time Moves, which was published by Meadowlark Press. And can you raise your hand if you also have a book with Meadowlark? Okay, Kevin, Tyler, Roy. I'll put a link in afterwards. Rhonda, of course. If you write in Karen, my first name, for some reason, you can get a 10% discount on any book at Meadowlark. So I'll give you the link later. And thank you so much to Tracy and Lindsay and other people who are so supportive of Meadowlark. It's great to have this small press. It's called Talking to William Stafford Late at Night. Never mind that you're a morning person or 27 years dead. I hear you over my left shoulder. Maybe, you say, then nod. Outside, the pink sky has dissolved to black. The snow exhales. Temperatures drop. The waning moon climbs over exhausted cedars. Juncos, chickadees, and occasional branches of sadness sleep. Maybe what? I ask, keeping my hand moving on the window of the page. Outside, you see what you always saw, dark on dark, a glimmer of movement, a low call from where the air glitters into itself. Behind the curtain of winter, spring. Inside spring, lilac, hard to imagine. Yet the dirt still manages to inhale the sky and make itself porous. We wait together for me to find what I'm looking for, not something known and lost, but the opposite. My hands breathe. The steady, almost undetectable buzz of everything sings toward the wide arms of the dark horizon. World, I could say if I were you, or friend, what would you have me do so that the perfect music could come out, juxtaposing dark and home, song and field, abandoned house of the heart, and noiseless crowd of tall grass. And like many of us, I got to meet Stafford several times. I remember him wandering around the Washburn campus. He was always wearing a camera. He was always taking pictures of us when we wanted to take pictures of him. And the poem I'm reading of his, it's actually An Early Morning, which is a spectacular memoir by his son, Kim Stafford. And it's the poem that they mailed out to everybody who wrote after he died. They sent this poem to thank them. Assurance. You will never be alone. You hear so deep a sound when autumn comes. Yellow pulls across the hills and thrums, or the silence after lightning before it says its names, and then the clouds' wide-mouthed apologies. You were aimed from birth. You will never be alone. Rain will come, a gutter filled, an Amazon, long aisles. You never heard so deep a sound, moss on rock and years. You turn your head. That's what the silence meant. You're not alone. The whole wide world pours down. And I'm closing with a poem I wrote in response to Assurance. It's a poem, his poem Assurance, I use in writing groups very, very often, and it just keeps bearing fruit. You are never alone. How can you be alone anywhere? The day's edge into stippled blues and stars, The lake carves exuberance into rock or forgets what sky made it and keeps remaking it. You are surrounded by the long history of air, each molecule abuzz with someone's need or fight for shelter or food beyond the odds, as well as each claw, wing, foot striving one lift or step at a time to make home out of nothing. Turtles hibernate between underground rivers and 6 inches of dirt, river ferried here for geckos and starlings to cross. Layer upon layer of the atmosphere houses stories, charms, breathless ends or beginnings where you, blown clear by the wind, turn your head to what falls. Swallows dipping sound into flight, showing you here, here, here. Thank you.
We have Michael next. Thank you, Karen. That was beautiful. Is
You want
Michael
me to go
on?
next, right?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And please share your personal stories if you would.
Yeah. Just a couple of things. I got to know Bill back in the early 70s when I was an MFA student at the University of Montana, and he would he was teaching in Oregon, but he would come into town every once in a while, and sometimes officially and sometimes not. Um, but my first encounter with him was at a poetry reading that he gave at the University of Montana, and he literally, you always hear these stories about poets pulling poems out of their pockets and to read. Well, he literally did that, and he got a laugh from all of us actually. And so he had 4 or 5 poems that were all folded up, and he unfolded them one at a time and read them. And he was very good friends with Richard Hugo, who was the director of the creative writing program there, and who got me into the MFA program. Um, and I mentioned, I'm skipping ahead now for a bunch of years. Somehow I ran into Kim Stafford, and I mentioned that that his dad and I had some correspondence, and that would Kim be interested, because he wanted to get his dad's papers, and I said I didn't know if I had much, and then I started looking, and I found a bunch of letters, and they were just typed on a real typewriter. It's really unusual to see, but but I remember I was sick. I had the flu or something, and he wrote several times, encouraging me and talking about poetry a little bit, but mostly just about life. But he was just so gentle and kind and uh, brilliant, really, really smart man. Um, so, uh, and one of the ironies too is that, and then I'll move on, but for 18 years, I was the pastor here at Fairmount United Church of Christ, and here in Wichita. And I had a parishioner um, who, as we got to know each other, it turned out that he was a CO during World War II. And I said, really, there's a writer named Bill Stafford who was from Kansas and was a CO during World War II as well. And my parishioner said, "Oh yeah, I knew him," and and they had been stationed at several places together, Arkansas for one, California for another place. I think if I'm remembering all this correctly. I might be making all this up. Keep that in mind. Um, um, and he, my parishioner, had an article about Bill Stafford and like that he not about Bill Stafford, but that Bill had written about life as a CO, which wasn't very much fun in some places, like Arkansas, where you were looked down upon very severely, um, and discriminated against. Um, but that was a neat connection that we found. Um, just supposed coincidence, right? Um, there are other stories I could tell about Bill, but I'll move along. Um, you can all hear me, okay? Okay. Um, I'm trying to think of some funny story. Um, I remember meeting with Bill Stafford and because at Dick Hugo's house. At that point, Dick was deep into alcoholism, and it was it was kind of iffy if you went to his house for some kind of event, and this event was really to host Bill Stafford, and and I was working full time and raising a family and going to school full time, and I didn't have much time for little social events, but I did go to that one, and it was just interesting to watch the two of them interact. I mean, it was that there were two geniuses and two great poets talking to each other, and so that was really enjoyable and inspiring at the same time. I was about 25 at that point, um, so older than some of the students, which is often the case. Um, I would like to read uh, one of Bill's poems. It's called North of Liberal. Um, North of Liberal by Bill Stafford. You open your mouth to say, wait, then falter. Far away, the open, the winter, and the four of you crunching snow along the Cimarron. The path is still there. It led miles and miles into brown country, so far that to go there again makes a new turn, almost makes your life into another person's. You glance around, the world has turned into now. At a bluff on the north bank, 40 years ago, someone did not come to meet you. A lot of people think, or over the years, I've run into people who said, he didn't, Bill Stafford just didn't have that much going for him. His poems are really too simple. But um, yeah, that they're too accessible. But in my experience in reading his poems, they are the little turns, the subtle turns of a word that make his poems. One of the things that make his poems really important. Um, I'm going to read two of my own poems that come out of a book that will be published in a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, by Spartan Press in Kansas City with Jason Ryberg. The book is called You Must Have Your Famine. The first poem is called Beggar's Belief, and these are both Scottish poems, except they're not. Beggar's Belief was a coffee shop a few doors from where my wife Gretchen and I stayed um, um, for about 5 years. So Beggar's Belief is the name of the coffee shop. Um, I'm not sure what it has to do with the poem, but It's there. Beggar's belief. The roads are wet with the October rain, and I walk. Keep walking. The sea to the north ends in ice. In ancient stories, the gods send storms from the north. This crazy weather, they say here in Moray. Wait 5 minutes and it will change. I hear the same in Kansas. I have not written much about you, so I will be direct. You were my nephew, my sister's son, sent to me by our mother when you were 8. She hoped I would calm the storm already stirring inside you, put you on the magical yellow brick road leading to the Emerald City. Instead, you stole auto repair tools from the hardware store next door, hoping to take them back to California to please your dad. That would be for you the Emerald City, to give your dad something he needed, and he would be glad, and he would hug you and say, Evan, I love you. I could only find you a not so magical dirt road. You discover all the rents, stones, and ragged edged holes, and you fell head first. The call came from your stepdad. Your girlfriend returned the ring. Standing in the restaurant parking lot, you put the 45 to your head, one in your dad's truck, his gun. You 24. It's a dirt road around your whole body, head first. The storm waves crash on the rocks, washing your feet. The wind is being its stormy self, still angry at you. Interesting that your name means rock. You have anchored yourself at the edge of the world, standing tall. You beg the Arctic ice to come closer, because now you believe, ashes and all. One more, if that's okay. It's called Cullen Skink, and I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Cullen Skink. Cullen is a town along the northern coast of Scotland. Skink is a kind of fish chowder, and it's delicious. It doesn't sound like skink. Have a bowl of skink, but it's really good. And that's the title of this poem. But it's really about one of my granddaughters and me. Cullen Skink. One morning, my Texas granddaughter, on her way to first grade, observed, quote, rules are unattractive. I recall this as I walked down North High Street, Portsoy, Banffshire, wishing she was with me. We would meet many dogs and people would let us walk their dogs like we did in Austin last July. Louisa, your name would be a good one for Scotland, although it's a long way from home here at the edge of the world. But I know you would understand. You do not have to taste my bowl of skink. You can choose macaroni and cheese instead. It would also help if you would hold my hand as my world becomes less and less like yours. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you so much. We are ready
Yep.
for Kevin.
I'm going to read a couple of William Stafford poems first. They are both short. Ask me. Sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Sorry about that, I said it twice. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. And here's another Stafford poem. I thought this one speaks a little bit to our current condition, so I wanted to read it. Learning. A piccolo played, then a drum. Feet began to come a part of the music. Here came a horse, clippity clop, away. My mother said, "Don't run. The army is after someone other than us. If you stay, you'll learn our enemy." Then he came, the speaker. He stood in the square. He told us who to hate. I watched my mother's face. It's quiet. That's him, she said. Let's see here. I'm going to read a couple of mine to kind of speak to these, and I'm going to post my little way to get a hold of me there too. This one's one of mine, as I mentioned. Man who's broken into the Capitol building, 6th of January, 2021. He wears a buffalo hat, pelt, complete with horns, face painted red, white, and blue, and carries the flag, the one we've sworn to, but as a spear. They don't shoot him. Let him shout. Bullhorn at his hip, now in his hand. Is he our man? Is that America what you've become? Shirt off, boldly tattooed, covered in hate signs I don't know. And here's a less grave one. This is based on a story that Kim Stafford told at the, I think it was at the Hoy Ranch in Cassidy, which was the first time I got to be a part of this gathering. And I read it every time, so apologies if you heard it before. Broken down car, bikers. When Kim comes, he brings his guitar and sings. And when we ask about his father, about the motorcycle gang that came in a cloud of dust, the Stafford family stopped, hood full of smoke, and that rumble of engines and spokes and chrome like pulled knives. Kim says father stood like a stone, like a monk, like a man who can say nothing, nothing here, move on. And the day clears of its clouds and the cycle gang rumbles past. They look, don't stop, their tires pull dust clouds, gravel like a gnash of cracked teeth, and the clouds follow them down the road. Thanks.
Nice ones. Dennis, thanks for joining us today.
All right, a couple of memories. William Stafford came to Southwest Kansas in September of 1983, and Margaret Myers, who was on the committee to host him in Garden City, rode around Garden City, and they drove right by the house they lived in when he was at Garden City Junior College from 1934 to 1935. I'm going to read a poem by him called Tuned In Late One Night. And what prompted this poem is that on the 28th of December, I picked up a load of cheese in Amarillo in a semi-truck, and I came up through Pampa and Perryton over into Oklahoma on Highway 83, and I got to Bryan's Corner, 31 miles away from Liberal, and I could see Liberal over the Beaver River Valley. And it was about an hour after sunset. The sky, just everything was just perfectly clear. So anyway, that prompted me to pick this poem. tuned in late one night. Listen, this is a faint station left alive in the vast universe. I was left here to tell you a message designed for your instruction or comfort. But now that my world is gone, I crave expression pure as all the space around me. I want to tell you what is. Remember, we learned that still-faced way to wait an election or meeting and then to choose the side that wins, a leader that lasted, a president that stayed in. But some of us knew even then it was better to lose if that was the way our chosen side came out in truth at the end. It's like this. Truth is, it's looking out while everything happens, being in a place of your own, between your ears, and any person you face will get the full encounter of yourself. When you hear any news, you ought to register delight or pain, depending on where you really live. Now I am fading with this ambition to read with my brights full on, to write on a clear glass typewriter, to listen with sympathy, speak like a child. And then I've got a poem which I wrote a couple of days after that encounter with Brian's Corner and Liberal. They gave me another trip to Amarillo. I was hauling groceries to the affiliated warehouse and to Benny Keith. But I stopped by and visited my sister's grave. She died March the 28th. So this is my poem. Originally, I meant to park on the highway shoulder by the cemetery to pay my respects on my way to Amarillo, but I got a message from the elevator trying to track me down when I passed that Quonset hut splattered with graffiti for 60 years east of Nest City. And I replied that I'd be there in an hour, so I had time to take pictures, record the wind, take it all in. I went to the grocery store, got a tub of Reese's seafood salad, said hi to Bert and Luella, got back in my truck. Later, I parked at Affiliated Foods 100 feet from the main BNSF Transcon tracks, 3 trains each hour, horns blaring, and I slept well, according to Fitbit, until they called me at midnight to take door 59. And I've got another poem. I was out, well, this is just a very short poem. January the 7th at the Walmart warehouse at Temple, Texas. I was walking around getting my steps. Watching the earth wake up this year as the sun went down today, I walked 10,000 steps. So, well, I'm in the middle of a Zen Buddhist retreat and I'm taking time out to come here. I'm so thrilled to be here and I will catch you on the return burn.
Dennis, you're one of the people who's essential. Thank you so much for everything you're doing, along with all of you who are teachers and professors. So thank you so much.
Huge pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you, Rhonda, for organizing this. Once again, it's wonderful to be here. I'm not a poet. I'm not a writer. I'm a radio producer. And yes, as had been alluded before, this is my home studio. It's actually our guest room closet. It's full of quilts and blankets and pillows while we're producing at home. So this is my broadcast facility for the past 9 months. For the past 15 years, I have hosted and produced KPR Presents, which is Kansas Public Radio's weekly public affairs show. And one of the missions that I love the most about the show is I see it as a chance to support Kansas writers and authors and poets, whether we're talking about William Stafford or Huáscar Medina. So I am so honored to be here as a non-writer to support those of you who create prose out of whole cloth. I support you wholeheartedly and admire so much of what you do. So in my humble way, I'm happy to be here to read a couple of poems. I'm afraid I've picked a couple sad ones this time, but they really spoke to me. So again, Rhonda, thank you for inviting me once again to be here. The first one is Bess. Ours are the streets where Bess first met her cancer. She went to work every day, past the secure houses. At her job in the library, she arranged better and better flowers. And when students asked for books, her hand went out to help. In the last year of her life, she had to keep her friends from knowing how happy they were. She listened while they complained about food or work or the weather. And the great national events danced their grotesque fake importance. Always pain moved where she moved. She walked ahead, it came. She hid, it found her. No one ever served another so truly. No enemy ever meant so strong a hate. It was almost as if there were no room left for her on earth. But she remembered where joy used to live. She straightened its flowers. She did not weep when she passed its houses. And when finally she pulled into a tiny corner and slipped from pain, her hand opened again and the streets opened, and she wished all well. And the second poem that I've chosen is Your Life. You will walk toward the mirror, closer and closer, then flow into the glass. You will disappear someday like that, being more real, more true at the last. You learn what you are, but slowly, a child, a woman, a man, a self often shattered and pieces put together again, till the end. You halt, the glass opens, a surface, an image, a past. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think most of us would probably say you are a poet. You just haven't started writing yet. Thank you so much. Your voice is beautiful. We like hearing you reading them.
Thank you, Rhonda.
You are welcome. Daniel Bentley.
Hello, everyone. Just a little announcement at first. I did a little research and I found that William Stafford is on Spotify reading some of his poems. And there's also a 51-minute reading from 1970 on the Library of Congress site. Those are both worth checking into. And I also found, while I was cruising the web, a couple of aphorisms that he wrote that were used as starters for people's poems in a contest. Faith is easy, doubt is hard. Successful people are in a rut. I follow trails so old that hounds lost it years ago. I liked all those. There were a few more on there. He had a lot of pithy sayings like that. And I'm going to read his poem, A Ritual to Read to Each Other. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhoods, storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade holding each other's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel and maybe a root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. And I think that one speaks to today, what's going on. This is one I wrote in the 80s called Mountain Air. There was a feeling that would come over me in dry weeds on days in February when there were patches of snow on the ground and sun shining bright. A cool breeze would call up what I called mountain air. Not that I was so familiar with the characteristics of mountain air, but because I knew that breeze was coming off of snowfields further west. Maybe in the Blackbird Slough or down in the cottonwood copse, medicinal smell of swamp willow, mellifluous slickwood sound, dead brown leaves turning like wind spinners, or right there by our little river, Smoky Hill, watching that water come down from time immemorial, that rare champagne bottled in space time that you get to sample about once a year when you're young in Western Kansas, if you're lucky. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed those. Melanie, is Melanie Pierce on? No? Anybody know Melanie? Lindsay, would you like to go next?
Sounds good to me. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and to see you all. This is definitely the highlight of my week. I am going to read You Reader by William Stafford. It's one of the poems I looked at recently in my thesis, and I always love those poems that directly speak to readers and have this meta poetry sense. You Reader. Any night you can awake and line up with the North Star. Any night disguised as a person walking, you can disappear. At the edge of town, darkness comes forward and opens its arms. That star near the horizon burns its invitation. Come on. So many lakes and lost places wait that you need no plan. There are miles of moonlight treasuring up waves and reaches of earth mysterious as Aladdin's cave. The land rolls out its own magnificence, and you inherit whatever your eyes can prove by their glance that they're worthy of. You listen for music and it comes alive, even in ordinary sound. The tone of your voice comes back from the world enriched by all that it passes over. And this language of ours holds it all. Now, go back and begin again. I've definitely enjoyed getting to know William Stafford's work more, and I appreciate all of the poets in this group and beyond who have responded to Stafford's poems. I've enjoyed reading a lot of those as well. I am going to read a couple that I have been working on recently. It was Jason Reberg's 50th birthday a couple of weeks ago, and so I interviewed him about silly things and philosophical things, and we got to talking about, what happens after you die, and this is the poem that I got in response to that. He wants to be buried with a maple seed planted in his ribs, so as it grows and its roots burst through his body, he'll keep up his pattern of getting busted up. He wants the tree to be big and gnarly, so that we'll say we see his face in the bark. And then this one, I don't know if he's seen that poem yet. I haven't shared it with him, but I'll see him and let you know what he thinks. I am not a Kansas native and originally come from Colorado, but one of the things that I have loved about Kansas from the get-go is the sunflowers, of course. So I always try to make it a point to make it to the sunflower fields at least once a season. So this is an ode to the sunflower field. Back of your head, as bumpy and soft as the back of a lover's ear, ready to listen, always listening. And that is what I have for you today. Thank you for having me. Oh, and if I may make a short announcement, Meadowlark Press is working on a 105 Meadowlark Reader. Hopefully you've seen some word of that. I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat box. We are looking to collect a slew of information about writers, Kansas presses, other writing organizations, just anything that might be helpful to have in a directory of resources for writers. So if you have information that you think would be helpful for Kansas writers, I would love it if you could head on over to this little registration form and include some of that information. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thanks for all that you're doing to help Kansas authors as well.
My
We appreciate
pleasure.
Dan, I think you're up. Dan Pohl. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
There you go. Can you hear me? Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Because I wasn't hearing anything back. Well, where to start out? Of course, I have this book called "You Must Reserve Your Life" from William Stafford. And just to go back to Richard Hugo, I want to share something with you. It's kind of funny. The interviewer says, in a dialogue you had with Richard Hugo, he was talking about the primacy of sound for both of you in writing poetry. He said that, quote, "Truth has to conform to music even if it doesn't," close quote. Do you agree with that? and William says, well, I understand that. In terms of the context we're talking about, in terms of literature, that's because that's what literature is about. What truth is about, I don't know, but what felt truth is I know a lot about. That's what literature's about, the feeling of it. My assumption is that we humans don't arrive at truth anyway. It's not something we have control over at all, but our satisfactions are within our control. Those things we do manage. And I think Hugo was talking about that feeling that one gets from literature, how it's related to music, to sound. By the way, Hugo was capable of casting a long cast of concepts to be helpful. And I was delighted again and again with his far-fetched notions. I thought that was the funniest thing he had to say about Richard Hugo. But like many of you, I'm a composition instructor at Hutchinson Community College. And so I've taken in quite a bit of information with William Stafford's struggle with his students as well. And just a couple of lines from a few poems of his, the one that is called Lit Instructor. The first two lines: day after day up there beating my wings with all the softness truth requires. You know, in order to teach somebody how to write well, the second poem I have for you is a course in creative writing. And the first line simply states, they, the students, they want a wilderness with a map. And that map is not what we're talking about. They want the map, you know, kind of like training wheels. And in some respects, I think we do as instructors help them with training wheels. But what we're trying to do is find their voice and their slant, what William Stafford calls slant. You know, like he starts his poems. His poems especially start with walking or some kind of movement forward. And it's a simple observational poem with that in mind, whether it's in the country or you know, traveling through the dark. Poem that he wrote. But then the second stanza may support the first stanza in the story. The third stanza may do that. But then eventually he says, the writer will find the slant, which is something that completely is different, that changes the direction of the poem. And a lot of that he did, of course, 4 o'clock in the mornings, laying on his sofa, supine, you know, just laying flat on his sofa and writing. And so, let's see, there's I want to share a poem of his, Every Morning All Over Again. And okay, here we go. Only the world guides me. Weather pushes, or when it entices, I follow. Some kind of magnetism turns me when I'm walking in the woods with no intentions. There are leadings without any reason, but they attract. If I find there's nothing to gain from them, I still follow. Their power is the power of the surrounding world. But things that promise, or those that will serve my purposes, they interfere with the pure wind from nowhere that sustains a kite or a gull or a free spirit. So float again every morning, I find the current. All the best rivers have secret channels that you have to find by whispering like this, and then hear them and follow. So I always read that to my students before we do any kind of creative writing in classes, that they need to find their own voice and slant for their poems and not have a map. You know, it's okay to have a map, but sooner or later you have to let that map go and discover your own voice and your own ability to bring the slant in. And to finish off today, just as a personal note, I started the morning today celebrating a life at a funeral at 10 o'clock. And I think it's quite fitting that I also am ending the day celebrating a life that was lived as well. The poem that I selected today of mine is called Celestial Bodies. I wrote this with several other poems during the break at Christmas. Celestial Bodies. Given what we need to grow, bodies develop to hold to hold minds, and inside them the world, outside time and space join. Hourglasses of sand inside, others have let themselves go. All those grains of sand moving, lucky for the glass not to break. We always have horrors to worry us, too big, too small, flat-chested, old. Kilauea grumbles now at conjunction, Saturn, Jupiter join after centuries alone. 1 hour east after sunset, 21 December, someone steals an F-50 in Lincoln County. The greedy monkeys always run away, yet seldom escape a chopper in the sky. What can we do with our bodies? Do we take any responsibility for them? What choice can we make to know certain? Maybe a good decision at a second life. And so this continual theme through his poetry has always impressed me, starting with our natural tendencies. In fact, you know, he speaks very clearly about living and enjoying the city limits so that he can cross those and go into nature itself and out of a created world of mankind and into more of a natural structure. And I think that is most what he's talking about when he's talking about traveling through the dark. And I believe he's talking about we as humans traveling through our dark. We don't know it all. We don't have all the solutions. And just like the deer that the person in the poem could not save for any reason, you know, why did he push it off into the over the embankment? And I don't think any of us would have any tools, a knife of any kind, or know how to rescue a fawn from a dead mother. And so, as far as nature is concerned, he is spot on as far as our ability to get back to that and step out of the city limits of our lives. And it's just a wonderful experience. And then to kind of balance that, I'll start reading some Charles Bukowski, just to have that little balance in there. But I can only read about 2 of his poems before I have to put those away. But the only other thing I had in mind was a few years ago, Kim Stafford came through Wichita and was doing a book promotion at Watermark Books. And I had the good fortune of arriving early. No one was there. Here he sat at a table eating soup and a sandwich. And so I asked him if I could sit with him and have a meal too. And he said, sure. And we spent a wonderful time discussing Church of the Brethren on his side and the Mennonite culture and Amish culture where I live around here in Mountain Ridge, Kansas, and had a thoroughly enjoyable afternoon comparing and contrasting the differences between the two worlds. So that's my personal experience with the Stafford family.
Thank you so much. And that was a nice lead into Janet Stott's poem. So Janet. Janet, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Hello. Have I got you? Okay. Rhonda asked me to read Traveling Through the Dark, and I was glad to do it because I always read it to my English 102 class at Highland Community College. And I always read it because it always, by the end of it, they were dead quiet. And then 30 seconds later, an energetic, to put it politely, discussion would break out between the townies and the country kids about what was the right thing to do. Traveling through the dark. Traveling through the dark, I found a deer dead on the edge of Wilson River Road. It's usually best to roll them into the canyon. That road is narrow. To swerve might make more dead. By glow of the tail light, I stumbled back of the car and stood by the heap. A doe, a recent killing. She had stiffened already, almost cold. I dragged her off. She was large in the belly. My fingers touching her side brought me the reason. Her side was warm. Her fawn lay there waiting. Alive, still, never to be born. Beside that mountain road, I hesitated. The car aimed ahead, its lowered parking lights. Under the hood, heard the steady engine. I stood in the glare of the warm exhaust turning red. Around our group, I could hear the wilderness listen. I thought hard for all of us, my only swerving, then pushed her over the edge into the river. I'm going to try and find a couple of mine. Has anybody got a new computer lately? This is going to drive me nuts. Okay, we'll try doing it this way. No, we won't. Okay, this one's called Casualties. A dream left me aching with past tense longing. An impossible situation a long time ago, but dreams have no calendar. Why wake now, remembering the intensity of his need, hidden behind a triangular smile? Instead, we call telling him you now understand your role in his life as a shield from emotions he can't unpack. He does not want to grasp my message, but I see it flash across his face. War-torn Germany, a mother selling the only thing she had to feed her son in a city bombed to dust. His shame being the reason for her shame. How long can a son's shame last? A lifetime. shone in his distrust of all women's love, shielding his heart behind the barbed wire of a camp built years ago. Reaching out, he grasped my hand and pulled it through the shredding wire, wounding us both. I lock him away again in night's dream casket, filled with rue and rosemary. Stay inside forever, I whisper. No, don't. And the next one is called downsizing, which is something I have been spending the last 3 months doing. Downsizing, so trendy, ecologically correct and financially prudent. But the reality is millions of decisions. Each possession must be judged, weighing use against nostalgia. Not just chairs and beds, but teaspoons and photograph albums. His father's framed Kentucky Colonel certificate versus my father's Art Deco headshot, saturnine and young, paid for by working every free hour to hide his family's poverty. Chairs, yeah. Chairs brought in a covered wagon against an oak table made from the boards of his great-grandfather's coffin, used only for the funeral before they interred him in a winding sheet under the sod of the treeless plain. Like the hardy roses left behind, our lives are pruned. Dead wood is trimmed, discarded. The vital rootstock of our past laid bare, thorns blunted by time and love.
Thank you very much, Janet.
Thank you.
Continued good luck with your downsizing. Perry, are you ready? Perry, can you hear me? Let's go ahead and go on to Beth, and then we can pick up Perry if he comes back on. Beth, you'll need to unmute yourself. There you go.
How's that?
Perfect.
Good. I'd like to begin by thanking Rhonda for once again organizing this poetry reading, which occurs at the beginning of every new year. It's really a joy to hear you all and to think about the diversity of voices that bring poetry to life in Lawrence. I'm going to read a diversity of poems, beginning with a poem by Gary Snyder called Ripples on the Surface. Ripples on the surface of the water were silver salmon passing under, different from the sorts of ripples caused by breezes. A scudding plume on the wave, a humpback whale is breaking out in air up, gulping herring. Nature not a book, but a performance, a high old culture. Ever fresh events, scraped out, rubbed out, and used again. The braided channels of the rivers, hidden under fields of grass. The vast wild, the house alone, the little house in the wild in the house, both forgotten. No nature, both together, one big empty house. And then, following Snyder, I'd like to read a little poem by Tao Chien who lived from 364 to 427. Turning seasons. Turning seasons, turning wildly away, morning's majestic calm unfolds. Out in spring clothes, I roam eastern fields, lingering clouds sweep mountains clean. Gossamer mist blurs open skies, and soon, feeling south winds, young grain ripples like wings. And now I'll read a couple of elderly poems that I wrote some while back. One is called Coming Clean. So on the first warm day, the farmer's wife released the burl of heavy hair, knotted at her neck. Washed in spring water, the clump of winter grievances spilled open. High up on a ladder, fanning her hair out to air across the barn roof, she flew. Encrusted Odysseus came to Phaeacia and was bathed. He shed salt scales and residual vanities, retaining barnacles of memories, clinging to visions of men lost, of a son and wife in distant Ithaca. He was refreshed enough to sing them all into story. Naked in these sea-born hot springs, womb warm, I floated, oppressions of long underwear and a long romance. I stripped off at the rocky edge and drifted. Spread out below, oceanic islands multiplied in mists. My breast rose in the yeasty water, and floating, I turned to see two deer, messengers, signaling the way back to land. And then ongoing. With wilderness, a domestic green outside my window, I read on my comfortable couch, aware that beyond the great chain of being and without benefits of myth or symbol, bird and beast go on cackling and growling in the Ngorongoro crater. I know too that the sun makes its daily journey across the sky above the pueblos, and that once a year, in a fabulous fling, the Kenutu corals ejaculate into the tumultuous and spermy spray by the light of the moon. Thank you very much.
Wow. Those were fabulous. I could listen to you read all day, Beth. Thank you so
Well, let's
very
do it
much.
sometime, Rhonda.
All right, you're on.
Give ourselves a day
Beth,
and let's read all day. And let's
You can-
invite everybody back to join us.
We Beth and I are in the plannings for her, I think it's is it 8th or 9th annual poetry fair for April. So if anyone's interested in being a part of that, we're not sure yet if it'll be in person, likely not, or Zoom. So do let us know if you're interested. It looks like Perry is back. I'm sorry, Beth, were you talking? Perry, I can't see you and I'm not hearing you. Have you turned your microphone on? Having a very hard time hearing you. I'm not sure Perry's at his desk. Pat, would you mind going ahead and reading?
Can you figure out how to fix me? I don't know how.
Fixed.
Can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The William Stafford poem is called Climbing Along the River. Willows never forget how it feels to be young. Do you remember where you came from? Gravel remembers. Even the upper end of the river believes in the ocean. Exactly at midnight, yesterday sighs away. What I believe is all animals have one soul. Over the land they love, they crisscross forever. And this is one that I wrote called Reunion. The end of my journey is in sight. Rounding the corner, I see my home. Headlights highlight the house, flickering like lightning bugs gone mad. Chasing my tail has come to an end. That which I ran from and returned to, a memory, a memoir of my life, now no longer exists. Dark days of my childhood are over. I am no one's child, for mother is gone. Across the porch, a gurney comes. The face for which I returned is gone. Sometimes this is what I wished for. Sometimes I wanted to be held again. Birch-colored limbs are uncovered. The face of the pale moon lies wan. And the second one is Let's Keep It Cool, a little lighter. Time to move the ice pack. It's working today. Pain's going away. Little frozen nerves chuckle their way into oblivion, temporary though it may be. The guys keep talking. I wonder if ice pack applied judiciously would make topics less heated. They could sit on one, a great big one, until they see the other as a really cool dude. Quit saying things so crude. No point in being rude. Let's drop this attitude. That's it.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Now, would you tell me the title of your first poem that you read that was your own?
Yeah, I will. Reunion, like a family reunion.
Yes, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so very much.
Welcome.
Great seeing you. Perry, are you at your desk now? Hi, Perry. You may not be getting the best of reception. I can't hear him, or I think he's frozen. Is anybody else having any luck hearing him? No? Okay, I'm so sorry, Perry. We can try you again in a little bit. It's frustrating, I know. Malcolm, are you ready to go ahead and read?
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rhonda. There's a link I'll put in advance that my relationship with poetry sort of began at the same time as 3 years ago with my involvement in this event in 2019. And I started writing poetry a little bit prior to then, and I was delighted to meet so many of you and start charting some waters. And Stafford has stayed with me. That was my introduction to Stafford then, and I did a little homework, and I wrote a celebration of William Stafford Creating a Poetic Life and Invitation 2 years ago. And I'd like to read it again, followed by The Farm on the Great Plain by Stafford, followed by A Taut Suspended Line, which is Kevin Raybass here has helped me, gave me some good criticism on it, and happy to see you out there. You get to hear some of your edits. I chose it because A Taut Suspended Line descends from my celebration poem. Some of the material and verse you'll hear again. And so you'll see a little bit how Stafford has affected my poetry. So let me begin with the celebration of William Stafford creating a poetic life, an invitation. Brush off those twigs clinging to your nappy jacket. Have you fallen off some rough-hewn country path? Tilt your jaw and lift your nose to the air. Catch a waft of pinon and sage sneaking from behind the clapboard outbuilding. Work the squeaking ancient water pump up and down till it runs clear and cold, sourced at its frigid depths. Lower your red enamel.
Uh-oh, did he just disappear on us?
I think so.
Okay, he'll probably be trying to get back on. Sandy Smith, is she on? She had to pick up a couple of dogs. Roy, can we go ahead and have you start up? I'm so sorry. We'll let Malcolm come back on and Perry can.
Are you ready?
Yes, please.
Okay. I first became aware of Stafford's work shortly after we moved to Kansas about well over 50 years ago. And one of the things I noticed as we traveled across the state as a family, and I myself traveled around Kansas, was how often in traveling this state you see things that remind you of a line or lines from Stafford's poems. And so I wanted to read a poem I don't think many people have heard, called Butterflies in the Radiator Grill. And I don't think Stafford wrote many poems that rhymed, but this is one of them. And then I'll follow it with a poem of mine. And both these poems have images related to Kansas and traveling around Kansas. So this is William Stafford's Butterflies in the Radiator Grill. Arrayed like Solomon, the radiator grill snores into itself blue, brown, yellow, gray, all the colors that the flowers of the field in their innocence, their carelessness betray. Lives we pass, a screen takes us. There are lines we cross like warnings on our way, so cruel that summer sings out. Storms, we all travel toward one big storm someday. That was Butterflies in the Radiator Grill by William Stafford. And this poem is from my last book, and it's called Silos. Round for a reason, standing tall, Silos watch over what farmers do. Filled full of silage, they sigh at the lull between seasons, wrap around what wrapped field hands cut, rake, auger. They wish to last, to never lean, to never shed shingle or laugh, never give up guarding fields, lanes, abandoned wheelless trucks, whitewashed farmsteads. They watch over red barns, tousle-headed kids clucking chickens. Rural mail carriers pull up out front. Their drive from farm to farm, punctuated by silos, like pins stuck onto the map of rural townships, telling all who drive dusty gravel roads, there is life, there are people here, right here, just below. Thank you.
Well, wonderful to hear your voice. Thank you so much, Roy. Perry, do you want to say hi? And we'll see if we can hear you. He may be frozen again. Malcolm, are you back on?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry about that. And thank you for taking me back. I'm going to start over. Wasn't that far in. A celebration of William Stafford. Brush off those twigs clinging to your nappy jacket. Have you fallen off some rough-hewn country path? Tilt your jaw and lift your nose to the air. Catch a waft of pignon and sage sneaking from behind the clapboard outbuilding. Work the squeaking ancient water pump up and down till it runs clear and cold, sourced at its frigid depths. Lower your red enameled tin cup to this gurgling flow. Let it brim midday, refract the sun's rays, ripple, glisten. Bring it to your lips to slake your dusty past year's thirst. Honor him who lived amidst such accumulated bramble, who, looking north or wherever, felt and spoke of justice. Found it in country walks, in the swerve of startled birds, in the slow bend of a still river, a sharp sudden wind, a single branch, an empty house at the edge of town, a vivid life, fully felt and simply shared. That was my invitation. Then I read The Farm on the Great Plain. A telephone line goes cold. Birds tread it wherever it goes. A farm back of a great plain tugs an end of the line. I call that farm every year, ringing it, listening, still. No one is home at the farm. The line gives only a hum. Some year I will ring the line on a night at last the right one, and with an eye tapered for braille from the phone on the wall, I will see the tenant who waits, the last one left at the place. Through the dark, my braille eye will lovingly touch his face. Hello, is mother at home? No one is home today. But father, he should be there. No one is here. But you, are you the one? Then the line will be gone, because both ends will be home. No space, no birds, no farm. Myself will be the plain, wise as winter is gray, pure as cold posts go, pacing towards what I know. My welcome was reworked into a taut suspended line, which I just finished 2 minutes ago. A taut suspended line. By the still bend of another slow river at the far outskirts of another hard town, walking beneath the railway bridge, ample shelter from last night's storm, its trestle a graffiti testament to the local high school's winning streak, to the bravado of this town's young lovers who dare to swoon and pet beneath its trembling rails. Below this span of engineered iron trusses, barn swallows emerge from their muddy nests to feed. Cattail fluff rides, chill mornings, swift acrid gusts, creosote tinged by barges half sunken in the shallows below. Road-worn, supple leather boots, spider-checked, donned and laced, twigs and sticks gathered from last spring's high water mark fuel the bubble and splutter of steel-cut oats and hot black coffee, dregs strewn and cleaning. The swallows swerve in flight as one. Above the line of thirsty cottonwood, golden and majestic, the ravine ascends to re-embrace the two-lane roadway and its raft of fast-moving souls again exposed to the beckoning outstretched thumb. Young wives ferrying children speed by, avoiding eye contact. Empties hurled by stone teens in pickups blaring country music clatter on the roadside gully grading. At last, a long haul semi interrupts the naked pavement, driver bleary-eyed and divorced, an easy ride till he forks south at the next state line. After the crying blind composer and her driver/lover's maudlin tale of picnicking and snorting coke off the hard, cool gravestones of her parents long estranged, comes a rough escape at a desolate four-way from the pig farmer's dusty bronco, from his lapward's leering eyes, from his mouth intoning grotesque depictions of mating sows and boars, their grunts and fluids. Beside the hot, unbending county road, far from the sprawl and highway thrum, a clapboard house's gravel drive gives perfect greeting, a red tin cup hung from a sun-scorched metal chain, inviting friend or wanderer, guest or stranger to operate the squeaking paint-flecked hand pump and draw water clear and cool from earthen depths. Across their shaded, well-swept porch, a childless couple brings iced lemonade, stacks of bologna, Velveeta, and mayo on white, and invitation to pitch a tent. Their welcomes pure, no questions asked, lies to defend, just simple, honest hand extended, which then retreat behind gingham curtains, flickering gray and blue as night descends. Within this grassy, green, remote oasis, these limbs will rest tonight and share the swirling sky with turtles, possum, slugs, red foxes, deer, and such ground dwellers as slog through this muddy land, who in dream allow the pinon and sage to drift and curl, the stacked stone fence to sing of sweat and hearth, the painted garden shed to laugh in blue and dance, while, all the whirling while, by even light of even day, the single taut suspended line brings news of birth and sudden death. Thank you very much. Good to be part.
Thank you. So you broke away a couple of minutes ago so you could finish writing your one line. No, I'm kidding. We're glad you did. Thank you.
Very funny. Bye-bye.
Beth, would you? Yes, thanks so much. Beth organized our Zoom meeting today. Thank you again, Beth, for all you're doing, and it's your
Oh,
turn.
you're welcome. Oh, good. Um, so I also am kind of new to William Stafford, but I have fallen in love with him. And the book that I am reading from today is an Oregon message. And someone earlier mentioned that sometimes people criticize Stafford for being too simple, but I find that his writing offers so much truth, and I think that it's a mistake to judge someone for being too simple if they leave you with truth when you're done. And Stafford also had a response to that. This is called Thinking About Being Called Simple by a Critic. I wanted the plums, but I waited. The sun went down. The fire went out. With no lights on, I waited. From the night again, those words, how stupid I was. And I closed my eyes to listen. The words all sank down deep and rich. I felt their truth and began to live with them. They were mine to enjoy. Who but a friend could give so sternly what the sky feels for everyone, but few learn to cherish? In the dark with the truth, I began the sentence of my life and found it so simple there was no way to back into qualifying my thoughts with irony or anything like that. I went to the fridge and opened it, and sure enough, the light was on. I reached in and got the plums. I love that poem so much, I was telling it to everyone. So, and then I will read two brief ones that are mine. This is called Time Theft. Somewhere in the afternoon, I stole an hour for myself. I ran with it down the Indian Creek Trail and tried to drown it in Paul Simon records. Eventually, I let it go and returned to work until long after the sun quit. And then this last one is called Summer in Asuncion, which is really a Rona poem, I guess. In the winter of '89, it was summer in Asuncion. Periodically, we took the bus to the airport to watch the planes come and go. As high school kids, we weren't flying anywhere. We just liked the feeling of possibility and the stories we could make up about the passengers and the stories we could make up about ourselves. Sometimes we sat in the restaurant, but mostly we loitered on the roof watching planes lift in the sunset. In the summer of 2020, which is winter in Asuncion, I find it hard to believe I'll ever feel that free again. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Those are beautiful. Thanks, Beth. Tyler, you are up. I've been trying to get Tyler to be able to participate in this for as long as we've been having it, and here you are.
I don't mean to be elusive. I've just been far too south for a while. I never had the good fortune to meet Bill Stafford, but I met his son Kim at the Hutchinson Arts Center several times, and the first of which I got to see him play guitar, which was wonderful. And I later wrote about him and his work and Bill's work in my MA thesis, and it hasn't left me alone. Can everybody hear me also?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So this is the way it is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt and die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. I love that poem so much. I read it every week. I wrote some poems as the pandemic was getting on, and a couple of these, one of these seems particularly germane in light of recent events. This one's called Poem for Old Assumptions. It's just one of two that I'll read here. The time is probably already past to say, what did you think was going to happen? Individuals of note the planet over have been predicting this outcome for years. Our world, secure in its defenses, assumes that no invader can storm its beaches or heave a grappling hook aloft and with a rope begin to scale our as yet unscalable wall. And yet it happens now. To our older selves, I would only ask, begin to listen. This, after all, is more than many have done so far. One might also say, when you assume you don't need experts, also assume that you are then assuming wrongly. It is the only way to save ourselves from our desires, impetuous as we are, and floating aloft like birds, spying only our possible dinner below. We see nothing of the larger bird waiting calmly far above us for a moment to sink its hooks and carry us away. The truth of it is this: we are not the only birds. We may not be the birds at all, and we must assume that every bird is bigger than we have ever come to know. And this is another one. It's called Poem for the New Normal. In the gloaming of our calmer days, I wake to the paw press of my cat, 2 years old and unafraid, who needs just me, food even with her bowl untouched, a gentle scritch behind the ears. She whines for pets before she eats, then munches some, comes back, repeats. Night brushes in beyond the blinds. She settles in atop her tiers of cat tree, stretches, thinks it good. Her sleep comes swifter than will mine. Now I must learn this kind of grace. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. It looks like Curtis Becker is up. Curtis?
Thanks, Rhonda. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed this event. Hopefully next year we will see everyone in Lawrence. Do miss seeing everyone in person. I actually read this poem. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I was looking to see what I would read, and my bookmark was in this spot with a couple others, and I thought it really takes on new meaning for me in this this pandemic year. It's called My Hands. And this is it is time for applause. My hands rest on the balcony railing. They inflict their silence, lying there innocently. Or I may wound people by not shaking hands. Somewhere, a computer saves it up, my indifference. If I ever meet the performer, our greeting will hover in subtle gradations. Sometimes I carry these weapons, my hands, quietly to a reception in their cuffs. They look tame, but I know them and hold them still. When they pick up a glass or a sandwich, they close. With just enough grip, they are generous, always alert, and they're mine, terribly sure, always loyal to me. So when I was thinking about what else to read, I thought I would read one thing that I wrote just prior to the beginning of the pandemic, which has taken on new meaning for me as well. And it's something I wrote recently. A lot of my recent stuff has really taken place around the house, because I spend a lot more time around the house, as I'm sure all of you do as well. This one I wrote last February. This one's called Last. There's the first time, but what about the last? The last kiss, the last hug, the last time you play basketball with your friends, the last time you see your friends, grandparents, parents, lover, your favorite horn in your hand to your lips, the last scratch of the pen on paper, the last word? Do you know when you have heard your favorite song for the last time? Or when you have eaten your last meal? Or when you have taken your last breath? And the last one I'm going to read today is a newer one. It's called Violet. Her painted face, variegated, white to purple. My menagerie of plants grows by one more today. The delicate leaves of the African violet called out to my mom, a siren song. She brings violet to me. Her mom had one on the kitchen table. Thank you all. Been great hearing you.
Thank you, Curtis. Appreciate it. We are ready for Annette Billings.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so marvelous to see everyone's faces. I miss being in physical presence with other poets because I think we leave a type of dust on one another, like poetic DNA that serves us until the next time we are able to be together. So I look forward to that the next time we're able to be together. I've not had the opportunity of meeting Kim Stafford or having known William Stafford. I came to know him through other poets that loved him and certainly through his work that I have come to read. Today I'm going to read Just Thinking. Got up on a cool morning, leaned out a window, no cloud, no wind, air that flowers held for a while, some dove somewhere. Been on probation most of my life, and the rest of my life been condemned. So these moments count for a lot. Peace, you know. Let the bucket of memory down into the well. Bring it up, cool, cool minutes. No one stirring, no plans, just being here. This is what the whole thing is about. Crosshairs. This current length of extended quarantine homebound time with its deluge of world-worthy affairs, one might imagine I'd have volumes of life-related poems. The truth is I am pregnant, gravid with past due poems with no delivery date in sight. All the nests that I have lined for new natal words are thorns and under siege. So I keep my poetry to myself. It's hard to write with a rampant virus that has crowned itself king. And in addition, there are feral men in long white robes, not to be mistaken for angels with their torches. Instead of typing, I sit at my keyboard fretting, imagining which ism will get me first. I am caught in the crosshairs of corona and racism, and it's just a matter of which is the better shot. I am pulled from writing to peep out my windows and check my locks. I return to try to work and find my train of thought has jumped the tracks. I lean against the back of a poet's chair, knees bound and gagged. It is so hard to write. I can barely breathe. And Tyler Sheldon, I changed my choice of my third poem, prompted by a poem that you just read. Thank you. It's called Everything. The cumulative time I spend stroking my cat adds nothing to contribute to world peace. She lays draped warmly across my thigh, a feline heating pad for a bad need. She is at liberty to lay thusly so because she knows nothing about the hounds at the door. Not so, my cat says in perfect Persian. I am a cat. I know everything. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely. Carrie, are you ready?
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We're good? Okay. Okay. What is my connection? Well, I made my escape from Gossel, Kansas, graduating high school, and went to Hutchinson. At Hutch, I went there and I wanted to be an English teacher, and I was starting there because they offered me a scholarship. I had football scholarship or an English endowment scholarship. Guess which one paid more? Higher education will pay you more for your body than your brain. So I ended up doing the ball thing, but I enrolled in a creative writing class taught by Stephen Hind. And he made me realize that it's real. Poetry is not something that is just has to be a casual thing, that it has meaning, it has value, it has impact and depth. And he was the first person that told me I had any ability as a writer. He also told me I was lazy. And William Carlos Williams and William Stafford and a few other writers were writers that Mr. Hind spoke to me a little bit about, used them as examples in his creative writing class. So anyway, that's, somebody had mentioned, William Stafford gets dinged for being quote unquote simple. I would say he's accessible and he's authentic, and he knew exactly who he was writing to and for. And I find his writing to be smart and introspective, and I've learned to appreciate it more at 48 than I did at 19. And he's a very talented writer, and you want to talk about legacy. We're all here celebrating him. A bunch of Kansas poets sitting around reading his work and honoring him. So, I guess his legacy outlived those of his critics, I would guess. So I'm going to read Living on the Plains. Carefully sending leaves always toward the sun, a vine climbs its trellis even today. Honeysuckle means Dakota and long summer afternoons. We lived by what the river did and how seasons curve into and away from each other, leaning into your face and peering hard. If you come back years later, your name will be there carved on the windowsill and the hayloft under the dust. Time doesn't hurry any more the way it did along with about school bell or when the clock heard night outside in the snow falling. If you ever climb the map again, you could stop there and whisper a few hymns, the ones that civilized Dodge, Cody, Abilene. I was living on the prairie. The first poem I'm going to read of my own is out of my book, Dirt Road, from Kellogg Press, and it's called Throwing Hay. At 16, I am strong, throwing alfalfa bales, stone grip on twine, in dusty rectangular stacks, god-awful heat pouring over everything, running sweat down into burning, squinted eyes, dripping on muscled arms, the barn, galvanized gray burning box surrounding the rising stacks, built with strong youthful backs in our furnace. John was slow and looked tired. Bayless snatched from gloved hands. He is sent down to help feed the conveyor. The shame in it shows. On his face, he just scrambles down to the waiting machine below. At 16, stacking hay, a farm boy's race, but for the occasional snake or one cut in half that stops a reaching hand. Mice scurry from cracks, making sport for the calico barn cat with her round crying kittens, fat from cow's cream, wandering around the barn floor below, not far from mother's care. We tilt red Coleman jugs, feeling the cold stream, then another bale to seat, until sundown when we climb down from the stack and hear the call. Myron the dairy farmer hollers, "See you tomorrow, boys," when we will return to stack a few more bales. That was Dirt Road, or that was a throwing hay from Dirt Road. And the last poem I'm going to read is, well, should read something. Here we go. It's called Rust and Weeds. It's the title poem from the book Rust and Weeds. It's about a little town in Kansas that I was driving through, and it just kind of hit me what I was seeing. And I stopped to start the poem right there in my vehicle on a dirt road in a little Kansas town. Rust and Weeds. Our walk over rust that sit on cracks, tires, Fords and Chevys, rotten knee-high grass. A man standing in his gravel drive with a gravel look by a blue Chevy truck. A brown dog watches from its wild yard. Vines over the silver chrome plated grill of a rusting red truck. And I think it's been years since that truck did work. A gray striped tabby slinks through an old brick schoolhouse. No roof remaining. Weeds cover, climb. Pigeons call from above those red brick walls. Around a curve, a white church flag hanging, moving in summer breeze. And I wonder if anyone still sits in wooden pews. A closed post office by an abandoned auto shop. Buildings boarded up, cracks and broken glass. Two faded stop signs at an intersection. Homes in need of paint, line, dirt, and gravel streets. An elderly woman sits, looks at me, then looks away. A white Dodge pickup rolls past. There is a park with a single swing, a single steel slide, rusted goals on rusted poles, and I think, how many years since children played? A memorial with mowed grass, slabs swept for those boys who died in wars far from here, names carved in this place on polished stone. This Kansas town, population aging, fading, a town at war with rust and weeds. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Very nice. I look forward to your upcoming book and readings.
Hey, Rhonda, I am back.
Good. Let's go and have you go, Carrie. I can hear you.
There we go. Now you can hear me. It's okay if I begin now?
Yes, please do. You're up, Carrie.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm Perry Shepard, and I've been very fortunate in the early 70s. I was going to college and had a seminar that William Stafford came down and talked to us and really gave you a feeling of what poetry is kind of about, in that even though he writes words that people may think is simple, but in actuality, his poems always give you a feeling so that you kind of understand what's going on with the words. So I'd like to read one of his poems called "After Arguing Against the Contention That Art Must Come from Discontent. Whispering to each handhold, I'll be back. I go up the cliff in the dark. One place I loosen a rock and listen a long time till it hits, faint in the gulf. but the rush of the torrent almost drowns it out. And the wind, I almost forgot the wind. It tears at your side, or it waits and then buffets, and you sag outward. I remember they said it would be hard. I scrambled by luck into a little pocket of the wind and began to beat on the stones with my scratched, numb hands, rocking back and forth. Inside of laughter, there is the dark. Made it again. Oh, how I love this climb. The whispering to stones, the drag, the weight as your muscles crack and ease, working right. They are back there, discontent, waiting to be driven forth. I pound on the earth, riding the earth past the stars. Made it again, made it again. And that's called After Arguing Against the Contention That Art Must Come from Discontent. I'd like to read a couple of my poems too. I just pre-released this book called A Rhythmic Electric Circus of Sound, Part 66. It's my first compilation of poetry. I have a second one lined up, and I've got a third one that I'm working on as well. I'd like to read a poem called No One's Really Insane. It came to you with a hole in his sleeve. His dreamy eyes enveloped your breath. He might leave tomorrow or stay for the rest of the time that you need him. He's always on the run. Catching up is just for fun. Denying what's there is so easy. He might have it made, or could have been saved from his fruitless imagination. With infantile succinctness, he babbles out his reasons for interrelating with others that enter his life. Hey, Marie, please. Giving and taking, being happy in his position, not wanting to go down the trails led by another, sort of an individual, striving for diversification in an arena of relationships, donning a title here and there, penetrating the moods with flair, a friend here or there oozing out into the sidewalk. When filled with chaos, the only way he knows how to lose any frustration is by leaving it on the hot pavement. His speech glitters with sincerity and actions come out irregular, egotistically bathing in the sun that shines from many others. Sometimes he seems to be just treading water, but he's crossing the river and not getting any wetter than on the other side. Oh, he mumbles and stumbles, and when pressed with decisions and writes about others, talking really about himself. No distinctions between the two, saying we're all the same. No one's really insane. He uses a different perception, knowing it all depends upon levels of activation. Moving quickly down the hall, his mood picks him up, setting up his atmosphere, cut into 1,000 pieces, and every bite having a different taste. And I'd like to read a poem that I've recently read for my third book of poetry that's going to be coming out. And it's based upon an art exhibit I did in the autumn of 2019. The name of this poem is Soft as the Sea, like this. Looking down from high, the rocks look uniform as they slide into the water below, like this. That time we rocked the boat ever so slightly, the sunlight reflected back like this. How we only wanted to go to the water. We needed the ocean like this. We ran across the desert desperately. We had to find the way to the sea like this. When we hit the coast, we ran to the waves, completely immersed in the water like this. And that night, I kissed your lips. I caressed your breast with my mouth, and your love was as soft as the sea like this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Perry. Glad you were able to get on. Just a heads up, Perry, new District 2 president, and Curtis is the District 2 vice president. So thanks, guys, for stepping up.
He is charged. Thanks. I'm glad I was able to get back on. Good.
We're glad you were too. I am up next. I really don't have anything upcoming. I'm still working on my memoir, which has taken a drastic change with some news recently, but it can be updated, I hope, and salvaged. I am reading Stafford's A Story That Could Be True. It's interesting. I can read his poems so many different times, and depending on my mood or what's going on in my life, different ones really resonate with me on a different level. A story that could be true. If you were exchanged in the cradle and your real mother died without ever telling the story, then no one knows your name, and somewhere in the world, your father is lost and needs you, but you are far away. He can never find how true you are, how ready. When the great wind comes and the robberies of the rain, you stand on the corner shivering. The people who go by, you wonder at their calm. They miss the whisper that runs any day in your mind. Who are you really, wanderer? And the answer you have to give, no matter how dark and cold the world around you is, maybe I'm a king. I'm going to read a fairly new poem of mine called Stained. They stand on opposite sides of her front door, the closest they've been physically, even though they've been friends for almost a year. He leaves green tomatoes on her porch during the summer, knowing she prefers them over red. She has said, I like to watch them ripen. She gives him cantaloupe and apples. Today he brings her whiskey and deer liver so they can drink together while apart that evening. Shared photos of their elixir within texts and a hearty cheers. The liver is from his recent hunts. He wants her to taste nature, something she has always loved. She knows she will never leave her home, was relieved when COVID arrived, so she had an excuse to turn inward. He sees her clearly through the window of her front door. We will lie on the hood of my truck, feel the heat of the engine, wrap the starry blanket of the universe around us. He looks distorted through glass that's stained from her side. Images lying on his pickup hood, rolling toward him, placing a finger to rest along a blue vein on his neck. She says nothing. Children of the prairie are supposed to be as free-ranging, fun-loving, and as uninhibited as the wonderful landscape that spawned them, he soothes. She hears the crunch of gravel under his pickup tires as he pulls away, remembers the feel of running into ripening wheat fields, wind twisting her hair, screaming into blizzards and whispering into tea storms. Yes, lovely memories to bring alive, she thinks, as she moves away from the stained glass door. I'm going to end with a poem by a poet that we all love and miss today, Diane Watteau, who was born on January 24th, 1940, and who passed away on September 16th, 2020. This was called Swimming to Shore. Lake Huron, cold and clear in summer, tempts me into its deeps, alone, secure. The Australian crawl I learned in the pool of my hometown pushes me through the gray water with barely a ripple. Reach of arms, kick of legs, body stretched full out. I think of the life beneath me, unseen fish, waving aquatic plants. I give one kick, turn, tread water, look at the distant sandy shore. This is not my element. I must go back, stand among the birch trees, join my husband, my children, the day that lies ahead. And we have Huascar up next.
Rhonda. Getting a little emotional with that Diane poem. Anyway, so we kept using the word simple today. I think it really matters the language we use with individuals. I don't think that's a thing that we can say anymore. So I pulled out the dictionary since I had the camera off on my shelf over here. And there's a word I think that we could replace the conversation with that we have. It's elegant. You know, I find his work to be refined and polished. You know, like a river stone. You know, just perfect, just polished by the natural movement and order of things. So I'm gonna read the definition to elegant here real quick, and then I'm gonna read his poem The Way It Is, and then get into some other some new work that I'm working on recently. So elegant, characterized by or exhibiting refined, tasteful beauty of manner, form, or style. Also see delicate, you know. So that's all I got with that right there. The way it is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen. People get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. So that's my William Stafford poem. I'd also like to share a poem from Louise Gluck, which I'm probably mispronouncing. I feel so embarrassed by that. But I've been reading her collection 1962 to 2012. That was like my Christmas gift to myself. And there's a poem in there that from her collection Averno, which is from 2006, called Omens. And it's just spectacular. So I wanted to share that today with y'all. Some of the joy that I'm finding in other poets' work as well today. So, Omens. I rode to meet you, dreams. Like living beings swarmed around me, and the moon on my right side followed me, burning. I rode back. Everything changed. My soul in love was sad, and the moon on my left side trailed me without hope. To such endless impressions, we poets give ourselves absolutely, making, in silence, omen of mere event, until the world reflects the deepest needs of the soul. That was after Alexander Pushkin. So the new work I'm going to read today are two poems in particular. One from some December 2020 poems, and one's a January 2021 poem that I'm working on. They're not finished. They're still quite abstract, need a lot of trimming, but I need to share them with people. And you know, since open mics are hard to come by right now, and they need some light and fresh air, you know. So here we go. This one's entitled Prize Fighter. A prize fighter throws haymakers in a bout with eternity. A poet jabs, a poet counters. I never wanted to box with God in a street fight. Emil Sharon can no longer referee since he began deducting points for all the low blows from God Almighty himself. There are no judges beyond the third. So every round remains unsanctioned with no belts on the line and no knockdown rule. Winter is usually a tough time for me. Like I get pretty, like my depression goes like pretty serious. So I think they refer to it as SAD, which is a horrible acronym, but it makes sense. But this poem's entitled Old Fashioned. And it's it's kind of like a pandemic poem. I'm not sure if it is, but I wrote it in December. This is a December 2020 poem. And that finished as well. But thank you guys for allowing me to share this work with you guys today. Old Fashioned. I drink what remains of the day today. At 11 a.m., the bartender calls the rind of my old fashioned a zest. Typically, I order a double scotch neat, but today I want to watch someone, anyone, try a bit more while I struggle through being. Daydreaming, the conscious state of gods, nightmaring, a human's plot. I'm reading Richard Brody in The New Yorker, They've re-edited Godfather 3. I've only seen the first. It's December, the deadliest month in the US to date. Coppola has always cautioned on celluloid of orange omens. In my drink, a cloud of citrus bitters acquiesces. I get nervous. Perspiration glints the cylindrical prism housing my X-ray. I get one each winter after bouts with pneumonia. Evidence of a soul carved out, remnants of flesh that keeps things together. I trust them here. They always cut me off if I slur too much, send me home to pray on paper. I used to write poems on drink napkins. I can drink more than allowed when I hide in silence, writing poetry at the bar top. They take me serious with a smartphone. A good drunk looks pensive. Uber means up, over, and across. I take one. The last poem I'm going to share with you guys today is Moonglade. I was working on this one today, so we'll see where it's at. I've been reading a lot of moon poems lately. Like people have been sharing them. It's just something it's a through line I'm seeing in a lot of work right now, including Luis's work. Excuse me. Moonglade. Each line skims the edges of my soul like a body of water, accepting the invisible force behind every phrase, gust, or breeze. I feel expansive, not limited by boundaries of language, truth the moon pulling inward. I pray this moon remains, not eclipsed by the world beneath my feet, this place that has tried to separate me from every body of water near, each one that has also tracked the moonglade away from the shore with no fear of drowning in itself. This is not a poem about bravery. It is a poem about succumbing to the vast sea of the universe, reborn as pure light, with a language for everything, fluent in feeling, a flicker in the darkness, mistaken for a star. Yes, you shine, but you house galaxies. I'm just a gaze in your reflection. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful, Oscar. How nice to see you and to hear your voice, and to be so honest about feeling and experiencing sad. I'm challenging everyone to go to Elk City hiking. I drove the 2.5 hours, I guess it was Wednesday, and hiked for 4 hours by myself, then drove home for 2.5 hours, and I was so sore, still am, but it is one of the best hiking trails in the Midwest. Water, amazing caves to go through. It's just 15-mile long hike, so you can do 30 miles in that one day if you want to, if kind of maybe want to wait till a little more light later into the evening to do that one. So that's my challenge for you.
Thank you.
Robert Dean, you are up.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay, I apologize for my voice. It seems to be disappearing on me over the years and nobody knows why. So I thank Rhonda for inviting me to this event. She sent me an email, I guess it was a week ago, asking if I want to participate. And I said, well, I've never read any Stafford before. But it encouraged me to go out and find some Stafford. And of all the bookstores in which I went to, I only found one copy, and it was one copy of Ask Me. And when I read on the back a blurb by W.S. Merwin, who is probably my favorite contemporary poet, I said, okay, this guy's good. My excuse is I have a thing that sort of native son, Stafford's a native son of Kansas, and Kansas poets always talk about Stafford, and so I kind of steered away from him because of that. Totally irrational. But now that I've read this book, Ask Me, it's like, gosh, what was I thinking for all those years? The poem I'm going to read is called Burning a Book. And the reason I chose it is because I do think it has some relevance to today. There's been a lot of comparison made about what's going on now with like 1984 and Animal Farm. And to me, what I think of is always Fahrenheit 451 because of the cultism involved and also the loss of knowledge via burning books. So burning a book seemed to be an appropriate poem to read. Protecting each other, right in the center, a few pages glow a long time. The cover goes first, then outer leaves curling away, then spine and a scattering. Truth, brittle and faint, burns easily. Its fire as hot as the fire lies make, flame doesn't care. You can usually find a few charred words in the ashes. And some books ought to burn, trying for character but just faking it. More disturbing than book ashes are whole libraries that no one got around to writing. Desolate towns, miles of unthought-in cities, and the terrorized countryside where wild dogs own anything that moves. If a book isn't written, no one needs to burn it. Ignorance can dance in the absence of fire. So I've burned books, and there are many I haven't even written, and nobody has. Another thing I noticed about reading Stafford is, although I would not say he's what we call a memory poet, he writes a lot of poems of memory, if that makes any sense, especially when he refers back to his childhood in Kansas. So I chose two poems of my own. The first one is from my most recent book, The Aerialist While Not Performing, which is all ekphrastic. The painting it's written to is a painting of a windmill against a huge Kansas sky, to me, that looks like it's about to break out raining. The artist is Stephen Schrader of Chicago. The poem is titled Windmill. You see it on the side of the graveled road, traveling north from Highway 4 towards the bones of a town called Hope. You know it, or believe you do, the wind passing its blessing hand over the spiky red-brown hands your grandfather used to call hard red winter, and you thought at first he was talking about a season. Only later you figured out he meant his life, your life, all the lives of all the people he fed, all of the hard red winter people everywhere. And you feel his hand, the ghost of it, passing over your brill-creamed crew cut, the red-brown spikes of it, the hard rubber ridges of a tire as tall as you, cutting into the seat of your Lee jeans, the chug of the John Deere's 4 cylinders, pumping air with a rhythm you will only later associate with the perpetuation of life, the sowing of the next generation. Only today, in fact, just you and the Hyundai and the ghost of callous-handed hope. And you wonder who owns it now. When the roof fell in, the barn collapsed, what made you drive up here to this particular day after all the leavings, lawyers, fingers not touching, lips not opening except to hurl hard red winter words? What do you expect to find here? The summer of your youth is long gone. You walked out the door with Ruth and Emily and Bobby. You turn on the wipers as the sky begins to cry. Also, I wanted to read that one because of the farm poem Malcolm read. And the other one is from my first book, At the Lake with Heisenberg. It's the last poem in the book. It's a short one. And I chose it without thinking about the deer poem that Stafford wrote, but I wrote this long before I even discovered Stafford, so it was not a result of having read his deer poem. It's titled This Last Deep Blue Day. In the borderland between highway and woods, you spy a doe's white belly, legs stretched straight in rigor, a fleet dream run down. You consider stopping, standing her up, watching her bound off into the fire and gold of this last deep blue day before December swaggers in, red jacketed, guns blazing, knives drawn. Leaves shudder. You heed the warning and pass on by. Ahead of you, the convergence of sky and road keeps its distance. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob. We're glad that you have found Stafford now. Gretchen, so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. My connection with Stafford, Mike Poge already mentioned at the beginning, but I wanted to say just a little bit more about it. We had a typescript, a carbon copy of something he had written. Wasn't really clear what it was written for, who it was written to, but it was an account, a 2-page single-spaced account of his years as a conscientious objector in his experience, and his losing the woman that he loved, who he was engaged to, because of that moral, ethical choice that he made to be a conscientious objector in World War II. And it was a really powerful piece. And I'm a professor of history, so I've used it regularly with my classes when we would be talking about World War II, just to complicate people's understanding of supposedly the good war. So I want to read for you a poem, a short poem that he wrote. I just discovered it today. It's called In Touch's Kingdom. We use the stupid self, a touch at a time are moved, and we save each other from drift, from loss, from hell's deep gulf that being alone could open. We hold each other safe, refuse touch. You fall, a loss too steep for thought, too quick for fight. Hell has flames that leave you. You go out. I have a different part of Stafford's voice, to me it seemed. And I would like to read 2 poems too. I know it's getting late, but these are short, fairly short. One I wrote this morning, and it's called Making America Great. Our greatness is moving room to room like snails in bubble shells till another day ends, while new twin towers fall in continuous loop. Hospitals are full and mortuaries. Pandemic math fills trucks and exhausts nurses and doctors, fighting daily 9/11s and Gettysburgs. Grazed by fear and lies, rebels scheme to hijack elections and authority with violence and great, great, great grandfathers' flags, playing their games of thrones. Once we believed we could master anything. Second poem of mine that I'll read is called Grief Is. Grief is. Grief is a cat you never wanted, who invites himself in and stays. You give in to his persistence, set out food and water, let him in and out. With reluctance, you welcome him to your bed. He teaches solitary cat skills, when to keen and when to hum, how to ask for what you need. You plow through the year he is near. Then one day he is gone, moved on. You miss his warm spot on your bed and rearranging your legs to make room for him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Lovely, lovely. One of the nice things about our situation is that people who hadn't been able to join us in the past have been able to today. So thank you for that. having Tyler from such a distance and my friends in Wichita, certainly Denise all the way from California. Denise will close us out this evening. Thank you so much for coming, Denise, or being here, I should say, being present.
Okay, thank you. And how wonderful that we come together annually to celebrate this incredible human being. He was a poet, but he was also a man who was worth emulating, studying, and I think the continued interest in his work shows this. Kim Stafford, his son, is sort of the webmaster, I think, of the Friends of William Stafford, has a wonderful website, and they have made a lot of his poems free and accessible, which is really great. There's some well-known poets who have relatives who have condemned the poets to obscurity because they won't share the poems without royalty fees, etc. I have a lot of stories about Stafford, but it's awfully late, and many of them are in the book Kansas Poems of William Stafford, which Woodley put out. It is still in print, thank heavens. So I'll just refer you to that. I would like to just say a few things about his poetry and his innovation. He really invented his own form. He draws upon Asian, I always have an Asian feel with his work, sonnets, fables. His work is just that careful balance between lyric and narrative. So there's enough of a story, you're pulled into it, but then there is the lyric intensity. And he invents time. The thing that, his poems aren't simple. I remember I reviewed his poetry the first time, and I really couldn't crack it. It took me a while to crack his formula. And, you guys are smarter than I am. It took me a while to really understand what he was doing with syntax. And it's very, very complex. And he shifts into 3 or 4 different tenses in one poem. And that's what gives his work the sense of transformation, I think. So let me read a couple poems of his that I haven't heard yet today. And I think this one is something on my mind after the last 4 years. At the Unnational Monument along the Canadian border, this is the field where the battle did not happen, where the unknown soldier did not die. This is the field where grass joined hands, where no monument stands, and the only heroic thing is the sky. Birds fly here without sound, unfolding their wings across the open. No people killed or were killed on this ground, hallowed by neglect and an air so tame that people celebrate it by forgetting its name. And I'm going to read Listening, which is one of my favorites, and it's I've had a discussion. I discussed with Stafford when I met him about his Native ancestry, and which he wrote about in letters to me. And I a couple of years ago, I was at a conference with Elizabeth Woody, who was a Salish poet from Oregon. She was poet laureate of Oregon at the time, and she said, we always think of, we Native people in Oregon assumed or took Stafford as a fellow Native writer. And so I think that's an aspect of him, for a Native identity is very experiential. And if that prominent of a Native poet said, we consider William Stafford a Native Indigenous person, that's pretty convincing. And this poem is like really about being receptive rather than trying to dominate the wilderness. And I want to celebrate also that Stafford was an echo poet before the term was invented. Listening. My father could hear a little animal step or a moth in the dark against the screen, and every far sound calling the listening out into places where the rest of us had never been. Morse spoke to him from the soft, wild night that came to our porch for us on the wind. We would watch him look up and his face go keen till the walls of the world flared, widened. My father heard so much that we still stand, inviting the quiet by turning the face, waiting for a time when something in the night will touch us too from that other place. And I have two short poems of my own. This one, Variations on Keening, is in response to Stafford's listening. My father's face goes keen, cicadas drone as darkness walls us in. His eyes are echoes on fire. He speaks kennings. His wise eyes burn blue fire. His prophet's sight pierces night with keen perception. Agate rings lie buried in river mud. His eyes see their spirals. A sunfish rouges under a keen-bladed knife. Sequined scales flake. Its eyes darken into a stare beyond ken. I keen. My father's twin star eyes gaze equally into and out of the dark. This one is maybe in the same spirit and based on a quotation from W.H. Auden's poem. It is called Levitation During COVID-19. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. My paired shoulder blades should be wings for flight among new angels arriving after virus deaths. Like Icarus, I should soar over the bay until the dead appear as distant waves, my friends and Menominee brother-in-law. At that height, the sting of grief will fade. Rolling lines of surf will be strings of pearls rippling and luminous in sunlight. Yet my flesh arms flail without feathers. They cannot lift me high enough to see the horizon where sorrow ends. Instead, from a hill, I see Icarus fall, splash, and the others. I am unable to calmly turn away from the disaster. Gravity pulls me into Earth's dark center. And this is, I have a new manuscript, Wing, coming out from Red Mountain Press. And those are two poems that will be in it. And thank you to all of you, and especially to Rhonda and everyone who helped organize this. My thanks.
Beautiful, beautiful poems, Denise. Thank you so very much. And just the information you share about Stafford every time seems like it's different and just so heartwarming. It just makes it seem like he's here with us. So appreciate all of you who had personal memories that you shared with him. And I'm so jealous. What can I say? So keep in touch. I challenge everyone to record a poem of Stafford's and post it tomorrow on your social media, as tomorrow would have been his birthday. So I look forward to hopefully seeing you all in person before too long. Thanks, everyone.